who were in hospital yesterday, 73.5% were not vaccinated, 21.5% were partially vaccinated, and 5% were fully vaccinated. Really just a testament to the value of vaccination and how it can protect you and your community. We had a record day in terms of tests that were undertaken, and for every Victorian who fronted up for a test, you are helping make your community safe. 71,224 tests were processed yesterday. And again, another great contribution, 36,878 vaccines were administered at our state hubs yesterday. 51% of the over 16 plus population have now received 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine, and we're at 81.7% who've received a first dose. So an outstanding effort from Victorians, and I'd like to thank every one of them, every Victorian who fronted up to be tested, to keep their community safe, everybody who came forward and received a vaccination dose, whether it's the first or the second dose. You're doing an incredible service to your community. You're helping make us all safe. So Shepparton, last night, the public health team made the difficult decision to lock down Greater Shepparton, and Jerome will speak to that and to the case numbers there in more detail shortly. But I do want to acknowledge that this will come as a blow to the community, especially after the hard work and the sacrifice that they've made through the recent lockdown. So we know that the people of Shepparton are resilient, they are tenacious, and they will rise to the challenge as they have done before. If everyone with symptoms or who's been contacted by the department as a close contact comes forward for testing, then we'll have the best chance, of course, of running this to ground as quickly as possible. So please, if you're in Shepparton, if you've got symptoms, if you've been contacted by the department, come forward and get tested. That's a way that we can wrap our arms around the presence of the virus in your community. I'd now like to take you through an announcement around the construction industry that I'm proposing. Also, you'll recall that yesterday we announced that our roadmap to reopening in a COVID-safe way, and reiterating that how thankful I am to industry for their honest and frank discussions that they've had with both myself, departmental representatives, the discussions that they've had with Minister Allen and Minister Pakula as well. This has been quite an exhausting process, but their contribution, their hard work, whether it be employer organisations or unions, has been outstanding. But today we announce that the Victorian Government is going to continue to stand by the construction industry and construction businesses most affected by the building sector lockdown. We'll be providing cash grants to thousands of operators who've been playing a key role in the fight against the Delta variant, and we're proud to announce $196.6 million in a package of support. It'll provide one-off payment to eligible businesses, including sole traders, to cover the periods of restriction from the 21st of September through to the 4th of October. So that's more than 70,000 construction businesses in Melbourne. The city of Greater Geelong, Surf Coast Shire and Mitchell Shire will be eligible for the Business Cost Assistance Program Round 4 construction grants. Eligible non-employing sole trader businesses will receive a one-off payment of $2,000, increasing to $2,800 for businesses with an annual payroll of up to $650,000, $5,600 for a payroll of $650,000 to $3 million, and $8,400 for a payroll of $3 million to $10 million. Separately, construction workers, of course, who have lost hours will be able to apply for COVID-19 disaster payments, as can sole traders who are not registered for GST if they lose work and do not qualify for state support in other programs. But I want to stress this point, and it really is a point of great disappointment to the state government. We're going to step up and we're going to play our part in assisting this industry, but we are very, very unhappy that the Commonwealth Government broke with its practice of co-funding business support packages in Victoria and refused to contribute to this industry. It is incomprehensible why this industry has been singled out for particular and, might I say, unfair treatment by this government. And the federal government, of course, have taken this stance for reasons that cannot really be understood. After all, these are, in large measure, small business operators who've been impacted because of lockdown orders. We've announced already that both governments, state and federal, up until this point, are continuing our existing business support packages for the next 6 weeks, or until Victoria hits the 80% double-dosed target. But the Commonwealth explicitly refused to pay for the construction sector. And it is beyond reason or comprehension why this industry, which will struggle, of course, as a consequence of the challenges that they've had to confront over the last few weeks, are not getting the support that they would otherwise expect. The construction grants would have been doubled if the Commonwealth Government had not refused to contribute to the Victorian construction industry and therefore broke its well-established principle of co-funding business support packages with us on a 50-50 basis across the country. So to those businesses who are a bit aggrieved about the fact that they find these payments less than they would see as being appropriate in the circumstances, can I assure you that the state government is far from happy about the fact that the Commonwealth is not maintaining the principle of cooperation and co-payment through this process. And I do make the point that this is despite the fact that the Commonwealth funded a similar program to support construction businesses in New South Wales. When I've spoken to the Federal Treasurer about these matters, he said his sole justification is, well, you added these to the ANZIC codes. Well, of course we did, because they weren't in lockdown, under lockdown restrictions until more recently. And if we hadn't have stepped in, quite frankly, the prevalence of the coronavirus throughout the community would have become even more difficult for our healthcare workers and for our community to deal with. So I want to give you some context to this. It's blatant favourable treatment for New South Wales not being returned to Victoria when we faced the exact same situation that New South Wales did. You'll recall New South Wales shut down their construction industry and the Commonwealth were very quick to support that industry. At every step of the way throughout this pandemic, New South Wales has received a free kick from the Prime Minister for Sydney. And the Treasurer for Sydney as well, it would appear. He might be from Victoria, but he's certainly not for Victorians. And this is Victorian business, that this act of churlishness, and might I say small-mindedness, is going to hurt. This is their constituents. We've made the choice as a government to stand by every Victorian business and everybody adversely affected by what has been a substantial economic event as well as a public health event. And the one thing we've tried to do is not play the political game throughout this process. That's what upsets us most, that politics seems to have trumped common sense when we're talking about standing behind an industry that needs support. So data released yesterday shows that New South Wales received $6.15 billion in COVID disaster payments compared to $2.4 billion in COVID payments for Victoria. In the week to the 26th of September, they received 85% more in COVID disaster payments than Victoria. Now, of course, Victoria around about 25-26% of national GDP, national population, and New South Wales around 35% thereabouts. So the disparity is quite profound. and it's quite unfair what's happening here. The Commonwealth Government has declined to contribute to funding towards this program. As a result, the state government continues to provide its share. But we will not be intimidated through a form of economic coercion to see our industries disadvantaged, nor will we be subject to economic coercion by the federal government if they think that our commitment to public health outcomes will be influenced by their churlishness and their mean-spirited approach towards supporting industries that need help. We will always make the right choices following the best public health advice from our Chief Health Officer and his team. And that is a thing that Victorians need to be assured of, and it's a thing that the federal government needs to be very clear in their mind that that is our position. They can threaten, they can withdraw funding, they can do whatever they want in an economic sense, but the public health of the community is our number one priority. This is quite perverse given that the state government is committed to the national roadmap. You heard the Premier here yesterday in unwavering terms, making it clear that our actions are consistent with that roadmap. And it seems rather strange that the political colour and complexion of a government seems to be the driving influence around what the federal government considers to be fair and appropriate treatment. And it's not us that they're hurting in large measure. It's these businesses and it's the Victorian community. So the construction industry has operated in some form throughout this pandemic. The 2-week shutdown is expected to result in a reset and a realignment on compliance and enforcement. When the states were left to do the heavy lifting, keeping the people in jobs and industries afloat as we battle the global pandemic, it was Victoria who dragged the federal government kicking and screaming to do its bit and to help out. And the first opportunity that they got to run away from their responsibilities, they took. Now, I don't know how much money matters to our federal government, despite the fact that they've seen a very substantial improvement in their budgetary position as recently as the last day or two. But I would have thought it really speaks volumes about their priorities. So apparently it's not a race when it comes to vaccinations, but it is a race when it comes to ending financial support for businesses doing it tough. If only they'd acted this urgently when it came to having meetings with Pfizer. So now again, we find ourselves in a situation where Victorian workers and businesses have been abandoned yet again by their federal government. So if the federal government, if the Prime Minister wants us to stop calling him the Prime Minister for New South Wales, well, he has to stop acting like it. Today's support is targeted where it's needed most, and Victorians are standing up to deliver what industry needs and what industry deserves. It's fair. In fact, it's more than fair. It's an imperative that we make sure that industry gets the resourcing they need. What's incredibly disappointing about this is a federal government who've sought to be miserly with money or malevolent in terms of preferential treatment against people and businesses who are all doing it tough and all deserve a fair shake. And ultimately, this will come down to the quality of the government's response. The federal government left people behind when they needed it most. This state government will continue to be there to support, within the parameters of our capacity, the building and construction industry. But make no mistake, this is churlishness, this is mean-spirited behaviour, and it hurts an industry that doesn't deserve this treatment.